The Kralthans, an elite race of hunters from the Outer Rim, descended on Earth with cold, calculated precision. Their sleek, black ships pierced the planet's atmosphere like arrows, silent and invisible to human eyes. Inside, the hunters prepared themselves, donning armored suits equipped with cloaking devices and energy-based weaponry that could incinerate a target in seconds. For generations, the Kralthans had roamed the galaxy, hunting the deadliest creatures on distant worlds to prove their dominance. Now, Earth was next. Commander Vrax stood at the helm of the lead ship, his yellow eyes scanning the holographic map of Earth's terrain. He found a variety amusing: vast forests, sprawling deserts, jagged mountains, and frozen wastelands. To the Kralthans, it was just another hunting ground, filled with creatures barely worthy of being called prey. Humans? Vrax had no interest in them. Weak, primitive, and chaotic, they were beneath notice. "This will be quick," Vrax declared, his voice a growl through his helmet's translator. "We'll take trophies from their fiercest beasts and be gone before they even realize we were here." The other hunters, 10 of the best, hand-picked for this mission, nodded in agreement. Scar, a towering brute with a scar bisecting his face, smirked as he sharpened his blade. Crone, the team's tracker, adjusted his visor to read the planet's life forms, eyes flickering across the data streams. Everything about Earth screamed simplicity. "Landing in 5, Vrax commanded, and the ship slowed as it hovered over a dense, isolated forest. They chose this location to avoid any unwanted human interference. The Kralthans had no desire to be detected by the planet's primitive military forces. As the landing gear deployed, the hunters leaped from the hovering vessel, their forms shimmering as they activated their cloaking devices. With barely a sound, they melted into the wilderness, unseen and unstoppable. Vrax's boots hit the ground with a muted thud, and he breathed in the air of this new world, a mixture of wet soil, vegetation, and animal scent. He found it unimpressive. Crone raised his arm, scanning the surroundings. "There's movement to the east. A large pack of animals, possibly wolves." "Wolves?" Scar chuckled. "They still hunt in packs? This planet is even more backward than I thought." The Kralthans spread out, moving swiftly through the thick underbrush. Their advanced technology allowed them to detect every heartbeat, every shift in the air, yet the forest remained frustratingly quiet. The thrill of the hunt was absent. Earth seemed still, almost too still, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. They found their first target within minutes, a large brown bear lumbering through the trees. Vrax raised his plasma rifle, a low hum vibrating through the air as the weapon charged. The bear didn't even have time to turn before the beam of light struck it down, its massive body collapsing into the dirt with a heavy thud. The hunters exchanged bored glances. "This is a waste," Scar muttered, kneeling to inspect the kill. No challenge. But something nagged at Vrax's instincts, a sensation he hadn't felt in years, an undercurrent of unease. He shook it off. "We're here for more than just bears. Keep moving. We'll find something worthy of our skill." As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew heavier, the trees denser. The usual sounds of wildlife faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. Crone's visor beeped erratically. He tapped it, frowning. "The readings are off. There's something large nearby, but it's moving too fast for a clear lock." Vrax tensed, scanning the trees with his own sensors. Nothing appeared on his screen, but he could feel it now, that creeping awareness that they were not alone. "Keep your guard up," he growled, motioning for the group to advance. Suddenly, a shadow darted between the trees, too quick for them to react. Vrax whirled around, but there was only the rustle of leaves, the faint echo of movement just beyond his reach. "What was that?" Scar hissed, his grip tightening on his blade. "I don't know," Vrax replied, eyes narrowing. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear but from the thrill of uncertainty. They had come to hunt, but something in this forest was hunting them. The Kralthans were the galaxy's greatest predators, but here on Earth, The balance of power was beginning to shift. Vrax's grip tightened around his rifle as the shadows closed in, and for the first time in years, he felt a sliver of doubt. Vrax and his team pressed deeper into the forest, but the unease clung to them like a second skin. Every step seemed to amplify the tension, as if the very ground beneath their feet was alive and aware. The Crowthons, however, refused to admit it. They had never failed a hunt. They were predators, not prey. But Earth was beginning to test their confidence. "Something's wrong with the scanners," Crone muttered, his visor flickering as he swiped at its interface. "I'm getting ghost readings, nothing consistent." "Your tech is failing," Scar sneered, unimpressed. "Humans and their animals can't even pose a threat, and now you're telling me this planet is confusing you?" Before Crone could reply, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. The team froze, their senses heightened. Vrax motioned for silence, but his eyes flicked toward the direction of the sound. It was close. The Crowthons spread out cautiously, weapons drawn, their cloaks shimmering in the dim light. They had practiced for situations like this, surprises, ambushes. Yet nothing had prepared them for Earth. Without warning, a net of razor-thin wires snapped from the undergrowth, ensnaring one of the hunters, Zarek, and yanking him off his feet. He let out a guttural roar as the wires constricted, slicing through his armor and flesh. Blood sprayed across the forest floor as he thrashed, trying to free himself, but it was too late. His body went limp, hanging grotesquely from the trees like a macabre trophy. For a moment, the rest of the team stood in stunned silence, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. "Impossible," Scar growled, stepping forward. "This world doesn't have technology like that." "They don't need it," Vrax said, eyes narrowing. "Look at the trap. It's simple but effective. These aren't random animals we're dealing with. Someone set this up. Humans." They had dismissed the thought earlier, but now it was impossible to ignore. Somehow, the primitive species had anticipated their presence. The realization dawned slowly, chilling the hunters. Earth wasn't a mere hunting ground. It was a battlefield, and they were being outsmarted by creatures they had underestimated. Their technology, which had allowed them to dominate every world they'd hunted, was faltering. Communication signals were jammed. Scanners fed them false data, and their cloaks began flickering. "Crone, give me a location," Vrax demanded, eyes scanning the perimeter for further threats. Crone shook his head, frustrated. "I can't. It's as if they're using the planet itself to block our tech. Something is scrambling the signals." A low growl echoed from the shadows. Scar turned just in time to catch a glimpse of glowing eyes before a pack of wolves lunged from the underbrush, their fangs bared and eyes gleaming with an unnatural intelligence. The Crowthons fired wildly, plasma bolts lighting up the dark forest. But the wolves were fast, their movements calculated, avoiding the shots with terrifying precision. One wolf latched onto Scar's arm, tearing through his armor with its powerful jaws. He roared in fury, slamming the creature against a tree. But another wolf pounced from behind, sinking its teeth into his leg. In moments, the wolves had surrounded the hulking hunter, dragging him down as he bellowed in rage and pain. "Crone, Scar's down," Vrax shouted as he blasted one of the wolves with his rifle. It yelped and fell, but 3 more took its place. These weren't normal animals. They were working together, hunting with tactics far too coordinated for mere predators. They had been guided, directed. Vrax's mind raced as he fired again, barely keeping the pack at bay. Someone, or something, was controlling them. And it wasn't just the wolves. The entire forest seemed to be alive with traps, ambushes, and unseen forces lying in wait. "The humans," Crone began, his voice tense. "They're not just defending their planet. They're hunting us." Vrax knew it was true, but the bitter realization didn't slow his movements. The hunters had been wrong about Earth. This wasn't a planet they could easily conquer. It was a world that fought back, strategically, intelligently, and with brutal efficiency. "Fall back," Vrax ordered, his voice tight. "We regroup and reassess. No more mistakes." But as they began to retreat, the ground beneath them gave way, collapsing into a pit that had been expertly concealed. Vrax and the remaining hunters tumbled into the trap, landing hard on the jagged rocks below. Dazed but alive, they struggled to regain their footing. Above them, the forest loomed, dark and oppressive, and for the first time, Vrax felt a creeping sense of dread. They were no longer the hunters. The hunt had turned, and now they were the ones being stalked. Vrax groaned as he pushed himself off the cold, jagged ground. His body ached from the fall, his armor dented and scarred. Around him, his remaining hunters stirred, their once imposing forms now bruised, battered, and covered in dirt. They had descended on Earth as predators, but the planet had turned them into prey. Crone, limping badly from a twisted ankle, was the first to speak. "We need to call the ship. Get off this cursed world." Vrax shook his head. "Comms are down, remember? We're trapped here until we figure out what's jamming our systems." The pit they'd fallen into was shallow enough to climb out of, but the psychological toll was becoming clear. The Krauthans, creatures bred for superiority, were losing the mental game. They had always hunted from a position of dominance, using technology to stay several steps ahead of their prey. Now, that same technology was failing them. "We're being watched," Scar growled, his eyes scanning the tree line above. He raised his weapon, fingers twitching. "I can feel it." Vrax followed his gaze, and sure enough, shadows moved between the trees, quick and deliberate. There were no more illusions now. Humans were tracking them. But what kind of human could do this? Their primitive species had no means to combat Krauthan tech unless they'd been planning for this, preparing for the day hunters like them would come. "On your feet," Vrax ordered, stealing his voice. "We still have our weapons. They'll regret turning this into a fight." They climbed out of the pit, their movements slow and deliberate. The forest greeted them with an eerie quiet, the kind that prickled at the back of Vrax's mind. The air felt dense, and every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The Krauthans moved as one, their formations tight, weapons primed, but every step felt like walking deeper into a trap. They didn't know the terrain. Worse, their enemies did. Earth's dense wilderness was a maze of natural barriers, and every tree, every rock, seemed to work against them. Scar was the first to fall. One moment he was beside Vrax, his blade drawn, scanning the forest. The next, he was gone, yanked into the shadows by something unseen. His scream echoed briefly before being cut off, leaving only silence in its wake. "Krah," Crone hissed, eyes wide with fear. They took him. Vrax's grip on his rifle tightened, his heart pounding in his chest. "Stay together," he barked. "They want us scared. We don't give them the satisfaction." But it was too late. Panic had set in. Crone, once the team's most reliable tracker, was shaking now, eyes darting frantically. "This can't be happening. They're humans, they're weak. This is a nightmare." Vrax grabbed Crone by the shoulder, forcing him to focus. "We've survived worse. Stay sharp or you'll be next." Just as he spoke, another net trap snapped, catching Zhao, the quietest of the group, in its grasp. It hoisted him into the air, his body twisting violently as the razor-sharp wires constricted. Zhao's screams pierced the night as blood dripped from his wounds, and before Vrax could even aim, Zhao's lifeless body hung in the air like a grim warning. "They're picking us off one by one," Crone said, his voice barely a whisper now. "We're not the hunters anymore. We're the hunted." Vrax knew he was right. The tables had turned. Earth, with its seemingly primitive species, had set a trap for the Krauthans, a trap they had walked into willingly. The humans weren't fighting with brute strength, but with precision, patience, and cunning. They had lured the hunters into a game they couldn't win. Suddenly, a voice crackled over their comms. A voice that didn't belong to any of the hunters. It was human. "You came to our world thinking you could claim it," the voice said, calm and steady. "But Earth is no trophy. It's a graveyard for your kind." Vrax's blood ran cold. They had been found, In a desperate move, Vrax fired blindly into the trees, his plasma rifle lighting up the night. But there was nothing, no target, no clear enemy. Just a forest, vast and unyielding. A single shot rang out in response, and Crone collapsed beside him, a bullet cleanly piercing his visor. Vrax stood frozen for a moment, the weight of his own mortality pressing down on him. His team, the galaxy's fiercest hunters, had been reduced to prey. He wasn't going to die like this. Not here. Not by the hands of humans. Vrax ran, adrenaline surging through him. But even as he sprinted through the underbrush, he knew there was no escape. The humans had turned Earth into a labyrinth of death, and he was just another victim. By the time he reached the clearing, breath ragged and heart pounding, it was too late. Figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in the forest, their weapons trained on him. He dropped his rifle, knowing the fight was over. The last hunter had been caught.